Still on the Inclusive FinTech Forum, as Africa pushes for economic transformation, closing the funding gap remains a critical challenge. The governments on this continent are spearheading efforts to attract private capital and leverage development finance to fuel key sectors like infrastructure, manufacturing, and SMEs. In an exclusive interview, Thapelo, the Chief Executive Officer of Capital Market Authority of Rwanda, discusses innovative financial instruments, regulatory reforms, and strategies to position Rwanda as a regional investment hub.
I think just in relevance to the topic, it basically says, there are a lot of companies or innovators in relevance to this who are here, who have projects, or SMEs who have projects, but there is no funding that is actually reaching them or getting to them. And also in relevance to the conference, all what it's saying is that there are basically about 4 countries in Africa that have amassed enormous amount of funding for their startups or for their innovators relative to the other countries where capital is much needed and the capital is not reaching these markets.
Then I would also want to know what are the key barriers that are preventing this private capital from flowing into high-income impact sectors like these infrastructures, manufacturing. They've been also talking about the digital infrastructures earlier in the meeting we're opening. So I want to know what are those key barriers in?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers to capital reaching those sectors, it's because, the smallness of the projects that need funding ordinarily are not able to attract the funding that they need, because majority of the funders, especially the foreign funders who understand the risks matrix of these industries, needs projects that are of a little bit of bigger size. And therefore you find that the ticket size, what you call ticket size, or the projects are just too small. They need very small type of funding, which ordinarily the funders who have the money do not necessarily want to fund at that scale. And then the other issue is the issue of the barrier is the issue of the conduit. You realize that even in domestic economies, the domestic funding structure, the funding is there domestically, but there is lack of mechanism or lack of conduit that is able to aggregate this or put together this funding so that it channels it to these sectors. So those are some of the 2 major issues that I think really are a big problem in creating the funding gap.
On leveraging development finance, how can these development finance institutions complement with private capital to drive economic growth we are talking about?
Yeah, I think in terms of complementary, they need to be the right regulatory infrastructure, environment, the right regulatory environment. You need to have the regulatory framework that is able to necessitate people with funding or people with funds to be able to easily fund this project. And then the other thing is that, there's a need to aggregate, like I said, the private funding, so that you can have various or majority of the funders able to take a risk and not only have one funder coming up together. And then the other thing is, there is that need for de-risking the project. There is a need for patient capital, either from government or from other sectors of the economy, who will be able to provide that patient capital, which is now going to match the private capital in order to de-risk the project, and the project can actually be able to be funded. So I think those are some of the things that I think can act as complementary, because you wouldn't want some private sectors to come into the economy or to come into the sectors to assume all the risks. So you need somebody else or development institutions who are able to get some level of funding support somewhere else to de-risk the project, that is put in some money, the money that is not looking for a short-term return but is looking for long-term return, and then that can be matched by the private capital to attain the funding mechanism for the project.
Someone may want to know the role of the government in that intersection.
The role of
the governments.
Yeah, I think the role of the government really is to create forums, to create networks for potential private capital, together with development institutions, to come together to have a network and an organization around that, number one. Number two, the government also need to, which is also tied to number one, to create a conducive environment for people with private money to be able to bring it to the market. Or the government need to support institutions like Capital Markets Authority that are able to make the environment for funding to be conducive to the ecosystem.
Back to this inclusive fintech forum, which is happening on its second edition here in Rwanda. They've been talking about digital infrastructure. How far is the African continent in that lane of implementing these digital infrastructures?
Yeah.
What are the barriers into it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities that are coming up in Africa for digital infrastructure. Firstly, because a lot of our challenges are specific to Africa, and therefore that creates an opportunity for itself. Number two, which is probably maybe a barrier, like I say, is number one, the issue of funding. The issue of funding need to come in. The issue of scalability of the project, because some of the projects, you scale them in order to serve a certain constituency, and in most of those constituencies, you find that the scales in terms of the numbers are very low. So you need to be having innovators to come up with solutions that are fit for purpose for African markets.
President Paul Kagame, in his remarks, reiterated on the brain drain. African skilled labor who are going out of the continent, which is also another barrier into this. How do you think this can be ended, specifically on our continent, even in this region?
Yeah, I think people are there's brain drain because people are looking for opportunities. And therefore, my take is that leaders in Africa or governments in Africa need to create opportunities by creating conducive environment to entice people to stay in the continent or in the region for them to offer their services. Because otherwise, people are also chasing what is good environment for them or for their ideas to thrive.
Then, concluding, I will also want to know what are the top priorities for strengthening Rwanda's capital market over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think there are a number of top priorities that we are looking at over the next 5 years. And the immediate need, or the immediate one, is to get the right regulatory infrastructure, regulatory framework. We need to have a comprehensive regulatory framework in terms of laws and regulations that are put in place, that are able to regulate and market conduct, regulate the market practice, and also ensure that financial or capital markets in Rwanda is up to well standard in terms of regulation. And also regulation also could brings opportunities, because you create an environment because it's how you regulate. That is the priority number one. And then the priority number two is the infrastructure development. I mean, as CMA, we are embarking on a number of infrastructure development. First, there's a regulator, and also as some of our entities, to make sure that there is adequate infrastructure in terms of regulation. We don't want people to be sending bundles of paper by a post office or by mail to our office. We want to digitize the whole value chain in terms of application because it makes it easier for us to do that. And also, it also makes it easier to make informed decision in terms of the data that we can derive from the digitized atmosphere. And then we also need to involve in a lot of market development. We need to get a lot of institutions in the ecosystem, listed entities in the ecosystem, a lot of fund management or funds administrators into the ecosystem, unit trusts. You need to get a lot of products into the market to create investment opportunities. And then on the investor side, we need to broaden the investor base. We need to broaden it and we need to diversify it. We need to get a number of institutional investors. And within the institutional investors is local institutional investors and foreign institutional investors. We also need to get retail investors. And within the retail investors is the local retail investors, the foreign retail investors, the diaspora investors into our market, so that we just have a proper market in terms of the ecosystem. And also fintech. We have a sandbox at the CMA. We are moving faster in order to broaden its scope and also to play a lot of business development in the system.
Thank you so much, CEO, for making time with us.
Thank you for the interview.